We're joined now by Sam McKewon from the Omaha World Herald. Sam, how are you this morning?
Hey, guys. How are you?
Oh, well, no, we're actually
doing
good.
all right.
I mean, I'm spent, but I'm enjoying. See, I like stuff like this, Sam, like my personality, because I'm in the solutions business. So I like to process and talk through things. So the varying perspectives I think are interesting. And at the end of the day, I'm kind of landing on we want our cake. And we want to eat it. We don't want our cake, but we want to eat it too. It's like it just depends on the people will argue based on what they want to be right about as opposed to getting it right. How do you think Nebraska's staff is going about getting it right?
Well, based on what I saw on Friday, I think there's going to be a lot of, and based on what I heard from the players, right, and just like the defensive players and the way that they reacted, and some of the things that might have been under some of the statements, I think they have to get all of kind of air out whatever frustrations they may have about miscommunications and guys doing things out of the structure of the defense. In other words, guys trying to go make plays when what they really need to do is just take care of their business and take care of their assignment. Because you heard so many players on Friday night say, it's one, just do our 111th, do our job. And you go back and watch the game and you can see that that some of what Illinois did was Illinois and some of it was Nebraska just
clearly
not doing what it's supposed to do.
Clearly.
Yeah. And so, I think that part, the defense has probably got to get together and figure out why they weren't on the same page and what the trust level is, because some of the mistakes that were made were more about, I don't think this guy's going to do, apparently, I don't think this guy's going to do what he's supposed to do, so I have to go make this play.
So
I think that's something to think about. And then on the offense, we can talk about that too. But there are lots of thoughts I have about the offense, but they're not there weren't alarm bells coming out of Friday night. I mean, Dylan Raiola missed a pass. Well, that happens. And there were a lot of good things about Nebraska's offense on Friday. So that's not my primary concern coming out of the game.
Sam, what did you see from Nebraska that you're like, hey, I think this is a fix they can make, or you just kind of have to do your assignments a little bit better here and there versus these might be bigger issues that I'm concerned about moving forward?
Well, you can't control the kicker or the punter situation. And you can't. There might be people who can control that in the sport, but there's very few. And it's like telling a caddy, go fix your golfer's swing, and just go do it. No, the club is in the golfer's hand. He's got to go out and make the swing and put it on the green. And how helpless must it have felt for both Missouri and Vanderbilt head coaches on Saturday, watching guys miss really makeable kicks all day long. They can't swing the club for their kickers, and neither can Nebraska. So Matt Rule can put that kicker out there, whichever kicker it is, and say that's a makeable kick. And that's very true. But it's like saying, hey, in practice, when we walked the course for 4 days, that shot was made. But, on Sunday on the back nine, which is basically the atmosphere of that kick, right? That's the most important kick of the kid's life in a situation he's never been in. And you're like, go out and make the swing. And you can trust him to make the swing, but it's hard to make the swing in that circumstance. And then the punter situation, we don't need to go any further into that. I mean, that's been an ongoing thing, in my opinion, for a while now, of expecting a result and then kicking it across the field in a very, confusing kick. So those things are hard to control. They're just going to have to get better, and you're going to have to hope that they improve. I think a lot of the other things are pretty fixable. The defensive issues can be a 1 or 2 game issue. They can go to Purdue and they can play more soundly. I think on the offensive side of the ball, there's not a lot wrong. There's things that they think they can improve. Just my opinion, I thought that offensive line played awfully well for a lot of the game on Friday night.
Okay, you're gonna get me on.
You do not?
No. Hang on, my guy.
Okay.
So there's two things I want to address. Number one, I think you're right. I do think the offense. I didn't get the maligning of the offensive line. I'm like, wow, people can truly make you dumber, and it's not. Yeah. And sometimes it's not fans. It's like people that do what we do, and I'm like, what are you watching? Number one, so I'm in complete agreement with you. But I want to go back to something. I want to go back to your analogous deal with the golfer and the club, because I think Coach Rule, and especially watching it with a couple of players this weekend, one happened to be Caleb, but then I got two other guys that I got a chance to bounce some things off of. Listen to when Coach Rule says this and tell me, does this not affirm basically what you're saying about walking the course, the club, the execution? Because what I hear is, okay, guys, if we're going to control what we can control, coaches, we have to do this, but we also have to understand who's in the game. Shane, play the clip.
Yeah, it was disappointing. And I think after last week, you'd have to say that, we really were concerned about the tackling, and the tackling showed up again. It wasn't great today. A lot of guys ripping at the ball as opposed to knocking the ball down. The penalties, I'm not going to talk about the penalty. Even at the end, we got hit out of bounds. I mean, I have to see what happened before I can comment on them. But we hurt ourselves, in a day where we needed somebody to make a play, and we made a play. Keith knocked the ball out, or I think that was Keith that knocked the ball out. We recovered it. We go down. We have a chance to win the game and end the game. Those two things were disappointing. But yeah, defensively, I think we have to go back and really kind of look and see what we're doing and make sure we're doing the right things with the guys that we have. When people they spread us out like Colorado did, but the difference was they were able to run the ball in those sets, whereas Colorado didn't run the ball.
Doing what they're doing with the right people they have in the game, but making sure that the coaches understand who's in the game, and then kind of intimating, listen, let's not play hero ball. Let's do what we're asked to do. So I felt like in one long answer, especially off the cuff, mm-hmm. He pretty much told us how they're going to approach this week, right? Like, that's what I hear, and that's also what I hear in your explanation. I thought that was an amazing answer, given the question, how quickly it happened after the game.
Yeah, it's a good answer. I think that probably as the game's going on real time, Rule's able to assess certainly the issues on defense. There's a lot of different things at play there. Late in the game, he talked about it. They went to sort of man-to-man, and it just didn't go very well.
Nope.
And
you saw it twice on the goal line.
Yeah. And the overtime touchdown, again, I don't know exactly. I don't think he's going to call anybody out. I don't know exactly what the assignments are there. The overtime touchdown, Gifford's running. That seems like an almost impossible play for Gifford to make. So I feel like there's somebody else that was supposed to cover Pat Bryant there. And then on the jumbo tight end touchdown, it's pretty obvious who was supposed to take him. And you got three guys pursuing the quarterback, and I think that may be because
get your eyes out of the backfield.
Right. There's some concern that he's going to run, and he can run. And Nebraska knew going into the game what he was going to do and how he was going to do it. And he was able to be successful in getting out several times. And maybe that's something that they can look at. There's a lot of different things at play. Landmarks when you're rushing the passer. Landmarks when you're coming after a guy and he's rolling out and you're getting so far inside that he's able to get outside of that. And you got guys dropping into coverage. You probably haven't done that very much. And you have to, and it wasn't even that big of a deal. Kyle Wallen drops and they get a 12-yard play. So what? You can live with that. But then there's other circumstances where it's 3rd and 7 and you got two guys covering a tight end while Franklin's wide open. Well, somebody, I don't know who's supposed to drop there, but is it the responsibility of Prince William and Yellen to follow Franklin across the field? Probably not. I don't think so. I think Prince probably did what he was supposed to do there. So there's just all these little things where they got to go back and correct some of the things that they didn't do right. It stings that it has to come in the circumstance of a loss. And the reality is, and this is not a comment on Raiola at all, if that throw's there, then they learn all these things having won the game. Because I don't think Illinois was going back down the field and tying it at 31. The reality is, the pass was just a little long. The guy running the route's not their starting tight end.
I think that's irrelevant because, and I don't mean to cut you off, Sam. I heard that a ton. Like, why is it Lindemeyer? It works because it's Lindemeyer. We act like we didn't just watch a wide receiver lineup at fullback for Illinois or an 18th string tackle play tight end for Illinois. Like, Lindemeyer's plenty capable. He's caught balls before. Just throw him the ball. Just throw him the ball.
Yeah.
Let us know if he's good enough as opposed to, well, why was he listen, man, do we not understand personnel packages? The play worked because of that tight left eye formation. Nebraska had shown a tendency. It worked for that reason, right? The Lindemeyer thing is inconsequential. It really is.
Well, yes. I mean, I think what I'm saying, I don't know if, I think Thomas Fedoni's blocked pretty well this year. So, could he have been, would Illinois have been more concerned about covering him? Probably.
Yeah. But if they switch positions, it's a different alert. And so sometimes again, and I don't know if Illinois did this, but I'll give you a por ejemplo. For example, like if we have a guy and he's a number one receiver and he lines up in the backfield, I'll say, hey, there's a new number one. Look for this. If Fedoni and Lindemeyer exchange responsibilities, you may not get the free, you get the corner. So like where he is in relation to the play design, I think absolutely matters.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and Dylan there, I'm sure he thinks about, well, what they'll coach him on is same thing that Pat Mahomes was talking about last night. He, after the game, and I try to watch Mahomes' press conferences because I find them interesting because he's not like a lot of other quarterbacks in the way that he thinks about things. I actually appreciate the way he talks about things. But he's like, I got to get better. My base has got to get better. I've been trusting my arm too much. And I think Dylan is probably leaning back a little bit there and throwing it a little, like he probably could have been a little bit more, whatever you want to call it. But there's pressure coming, and I'm sure he feels bad. And there's, this is adversity that he'll have to work through. But I just didn't walk out of that Friday night game thinking that any of that game or why they lost was really on Raiola. I mean, he did a lot of really good things. He wasn't perfect, but I think Sip had a column Sunday, and he made a good point.
That's probably not true, but I'll hear you out.
I'm
totally joking.
That we did like there was a lot of expectations on Adrian Martinez to rescue Nebraska from things that he had to rescue them from because they didn't have that stuff right, and as a result, Adrian's asked to do things, and Adrian wasn't perfect. And, that's a good point that like, there was a lot of times when it felt like, well, if Adrian had only done this, and I'm like, yeah, kind of. I mean, that's true.
But you can say that and still want a guy to get rid of the ball in the pocket or have better ball security too, right?
Yeah. The biggest concern for Friday night from Dylan was the two fumbles that were recovered by Nebraska. You can't have the ball down there, and that could have lost the game, and that would have been. That's probably the thing where it's like, man, you can't do that. You can't have the ball down there and you got to have it up because that's going to get stripped. And it was twice, and he was fortunate enough that it was recovered both times. But, I think there's a lot of things about Nebraska's offense that's working. I think they could run the ball more. And again, you're the running back, so way more than I do about this. I just feel like Emmett Johnson needs a couple of totes.
I'm probably with you there. That game for me, this is oversimplification, but that game for me, based on how I think Illinois situationally fits on the perimeter with their secondary guys and how their linebackers were playing, that was a vision game where you wanted to play to guys that could find creases as opposed to needing them to be there. Because I felt like Illinois is pretty well coached, and their back end could tackle. So That game was about vision. We left some yards out there, in my opinion. People will hand wring and they'll make a big deal about Mazuka versus Latovsky or whatever. But like sometimes backs have to help you out too, you know?
Oh, no question. And Dante had a really nice.
You can't cut across guys' face, right?
Right.
I mean, Fagan didn't look great all night until he made a play, and we're not talking about Illinois' lack of ground game because that 23-yarder at that point he had 11 carries for 51 yards. Like we're not.
He was great late. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like sometimes it's just. I do. Sometimes it's just. I do. Your running back's got to make a play for you.
Yeah, and so like I think one of the things that we've talked about this many times before, there's an art to being a great running back. It's fun to watch really great running backs even today, even though they're not relied upon the same way as they were 30 years ago. And I think you can hit a hole 100 miles an hour every single time, and that's great when the hole's really big. But sometimes you have to have a little bit of just, I don't know, you're running at 97% because that last 3% is made for a cut. That I just feel like sometimes Emmett Johnson makes. And again, maybe it's just, maybe I'm missing that. And maybe there's things that I don't quite, maybe there's things in practice that he's not getting done. I just, I've seen this guy make runs, especially in fourth quarters. And it just, he didn't get any carries. And there was also, you get to overtime and the first statement is, well, we're going to take a shot. And I'm like, why? Okay. Like, okay. Like you want to score the touchdown on the first play, and then because you don't want to, and I'm thinking, is it because you don't want to deplete your plays? Because if you score right away, then you can go out on offense on the next drive and have your full complement of playbook. I don't, like, I get that. And those are all questions that we can ask Rule today, and there's too many questions about that kind of theory to really get into it for an hour. And it's annoying too, because it's like at the end of the day, he's going to say, wait, we didn't lose this game because of anything we did on offense. We lost because of defense. And I get that.
I mean, to some degree, but yes and no. Like
it hasn't have anything to do with the offense on Friday. That's what he said. Yeah.
I know, but that was at first blush. I think he thinks that there are some plays they left out there. I would hope that he feels that way.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think that's probably true. Again, like there's a lot of different ways that you could look at how the game's managed in the fourth quarter. Should they have put the kicker out there? I totally understand where he's coming from, and he's the coach. I'm not. In overtime, and maybe this is because I've seen all the overtime games over the last decade. I've watched Nebraska try to go out and score right away, and I watched Tommy throw a pick at Miami. And I think that was the first one. That was the first overtime game where it got blown out of proportion. I've watched other overtime games where, they're trying to score right away and they fumble or whatever. And I'm standing there on the sideline and I'm like, they should go on offense first.
No way.
I know people completely disagree with that. And no, you need to go on defense because you need to know what they're going to do. And I thought to myself, you put Illinois out there, they're going to score right away. You're gonna have to go out there and you're gonna have
but they hadn't been doing that. So like, why would you have thought that?
Well, the only thing that constrained Illinois from scoring at the end of regulation was the clock, and so I think Illinois was very comfortable going into overtime. I think they were fine and would have, So like, but I get it. But the play is always to go on defense first.
They scored 7-3, 7-7. So
I know. I know.
Okay.
I think that going into overtime,
all right,
the advantage was for again, and this is so. Here's part of why I say teams should consider going on offense more often. I think there's a pressure that is created, especially on a kicker. If the first team goes out and scores even 3 or 7 or whatever, there's a ton of pressure on the offense that then goes out after that to match it. And there's a lot of pressure on the kicker. And we saw that on Saturday, in the Missouri Vanderbilt game. Like that guy, well, first of all, he looked like a cross-country runner put in a football uniform. And I felt for that kid. nobody, not a ton of people around here really like Missouri. So, like, I'm guessing the state of Nebraska, about 98% of the state of Nebraska is rooting for Vanderbilt in that game, right? And so, like, he goes out there, and that was an easy kick. That was not a hard kick, and he made a 55-yard earlier in the game, and he hooked that thing in the lake. I mean, that thing might have gone into the bleachers if it had been a longer kick, and it's because of the pressure. And so, like, I think there's an argument to be made for going on offense because you control the emotional temperature of that moment.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm wrong, but, like, Nebraska has not even – they've only attempted in the overtimes that they've had since 2015, I think they've only attempted one field goal. Like, they haven't even had – and that was the one they missed at Colorado in 2019, and it was like 50 yards because they kept going backwards. But, like, they haven't even really they haven't even tried to score because they haven't even put a kicker out on the field very often. And so obviously they weren't going to do that. They started on defense, and then they were immediately in a tough spot because Illinois scored right away. And so you knew it was like, oh boy, here we go. And, and then those last three plays didn't go well. And Damon, I heard from so many people who were ticked off about the overtime offense.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, they were furious. And I'm like, well, okay, I get it. They were mad. They were like, oh, what was that? They quit. And I'm like, they didn't quit. Come on now. That's not
That
true.
is so ridiculous.
People are keyed up. People really want this team to be good.
Yeah,
and
no, I get it. And you know what, Sam? They're going to be. You watch.
Here's another thing I heard. And I've heard this now for a couple of weeks. By goodness, they finally have a quarterback. They better be good. So there's this sense of, like, a lot of people really like Dylan. They like him. And they love watching him already. And it's like, better not screw it up. Like, that's some of the feeling of the fan base is like, we finally got a guy. We finally got another Tommy or whatever. Boy, better win because this guy's good. And I think that's shaped by what happened last year and a few other things. Like last year, the quarterbacking was subpar, and they probably should have won more games than they did. And now they have a quarterback who's not subpar. He's good. And I think fans are like, oh my goodness, don't win games with this guy. I think that's the field.
Sam, we appreciate the time as always. Good stuff there. We'll talk to you again next week.
Did we solve all the problems?
I think we got. We got a good start.
We're just putting one foot in front of the other, Sam. We got to figure out.
You got to get a business card that says Damon Benning Solutions.
Yeah, fix it.
And you just, and it's got your number on it, and it's got an email address, and you're just like you're like Winston Wolfe. I'm in the solutions.
I'm trying to figure out how we kicked the ball for 50 yards a punt and only netted 30 yards. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, I'm the wrong person to talk to about that. They could have went out and got anyway. We'll talk.
Wow.
We'll talk to you later, Sam. We appreciate it as always. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.